The Vatican Square stood breathless, raindrops glistening on the ancient cobblestones like teardrops of anticipation. For days, the world had watched with bated breath as the Sistine Chapel became once again the sacred vessel of divine discernment. The death of Pope Francis had cast a shadow of uncertainty over the Catholic Church, a billion souls adrift in waters of speculation about who would next guide the Barque of Peter through the tumultuous seas of modernity. When the white smoke finally ascended heavenward, spiraling into the Roman twilight like a prayer taking flight, few could have predicted the announcement that would follow. Habemus Papam, Robertum Franciscum Prevost, sibi nomen imposuit. Leonem Decimum Quartum. The square fell silent, then erupted in surprised applause. Robert Francis Prevost, the American cardinal, former missionary and canon law scholar, had been elected the 267th successor of St. Peter. In that crystallized moment of divine appointment, the Church turned a new page in its 2,000-year history. The first pope from the United States of America would now shepherd the universal flock, a choice both unexpected and providential. The election of Cardinal Prevost as Pope Leo XIV sent ripples through the global Catholic community and beyond. Journalists rushed to piece together profiles of this relatively unknown figure who had spent decades away from the spotlight. Catholics from Chicago beamed with local pride, while Peruvians celebrated the elevation of a man who had walked their dusty streets and shared their humble meals for nearly 20 years. Vatican observers noted the symbolic weight of his chosen papal name, Leo, evoking memories of great reformer popes, particularly Leo III, whose encyclical Rerum Novarum had addressed the social questions of his time with clarity and wisdom. The 14 that followed suggested continuity with tradition, while acknowledging the unique challenges of the present age. As the new pontiff stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica for the first time, his gentle smile belied the steel resolve in his eyes. Before offering his blessing to the city and the world, he asked for a moment of silent prayer, not for him to lead the Church well, but for the Church to remain faithful to Christ in all things. This simple gesture revealed the essence of the man now known as Pope Leo XIV, a shepherd whose primary concern was not his own legacy, but the spiritual health of the flock entrusted to his care by the divine shepherd himself. Robert Francis Prevost's story began far from the ornate halls of the Vatican, in the bustling streets of Chicago, on September 14, 1955. Born into a devout Catholic family of modest means, young Robert breathed the air of faith from his earliest days. His parents, Michael and Elizabeth Prevost, raised their children in the shadow of the parish steeple, where the liturgical seasons marked time more significantly than the changing weather. The Prevost home was a domestic church where prayers were said before meals, saints' stories were bedtime reading, and Sunday Mass attendance was non-negotiable. But it was not stern obligation that characterized this household. Rather, it was a living, joyful faith that permeated everyday life. His mother often repeated her favorite saying, "A heart that knows God can find him everywhere," a phrase that would echo throughout Robert's life and ministry. Even as a child, Robert displayed an unusual attentiveness during liturgies, a contemplative nature that seemed to absorb the sacred mysteries with a depth beyond his years. His parish priest once remarked to his parents, "That boy doesn't just attend Mass, he lives it." The formative years of his youth coincided with the sweeping changes of the Second Vatican Council, and young Robert witnessed firsthand both the excitement and tensions of a church in transition. Rather than being swept away by conflicting currents, this experience instilled in him a profound appreciation for both continuity and authentic development in church teaching. His high school teachers at St. Ignatius College Prep noted his exceptional academic abilities, particularly in mathematics and philosophy, but also his remarkable capacity to listen deeply to opposing viewpoints without losing his own center. While other teenagers rebelled against authority, Robert seemed to possess an old soul's understanding that true freedom came through disciplined commitment rather than boundary breaking. His journal from this period, later shared by family members, reveals a young man already wrestling with life's deepest questions. What does God want of me? Not just what career, But what kind of man am I called to become? As graduation approached, while classmates discussed university plans and career ambitions, Robert found himself increasingly drawn to a different path. The calling had been a gentle but persistent whisper for years, growing steadily in clarity until he could no longer ignore it. At 18, to the surprise of some but the confirmation of those who knew him best, Robert Prevost announced his intention to enter religious life and begin studies for the priesthood. The Order of St. Augustine, with its rich intellectual tradition and community-centered spirituality, proved the perfect spiritual home for the contemplative yet pragmatic young man from Chicago. Robert entered the novitiate in 1974, embracing the rule of St. Augustine with its emphasis on common life, shared goods, and the restless search for God. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O Lord. Augustine's famous words from his Confessions became the heartbeat of Prevost's spirituality. The rigorous formation combined intellectual development with spiritual discipline, challenging novices to integrate knowledge with lived faith. Robert made his simple profession in 1977, committing himself to the Augustinian way through the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Those who lived with him during these early years remember a brother who found joy in simplicity, who approached studies with diligence yet never used his intellectual gifts to diminish others, and who could be found in the chapel before dawn and after dusk, developing the habit of contemplative prayer that would sustain him through future challenges. His academic path led him to degrees in mathematics and philosophy, disciplines that honed his logical thinking while deepening his understanding of the human search for meaning. Yet Robert's formation extended beyond books and classrooms. During summer assignments, he worked with the poor in urban neighborhoods, taught religious education to children, and visited the elderly and sick, practical applications of the gospel that would shape his pastoral approach. He took his solemn vows in 1981, permanently binding himself to the Augustinian community and its mission. On June 19, 1982, in a sun-dappled ceremony in Rome, Robert Prevost was ordained to the priesthood. As he lay prostrate before the altar, during the ordination ritual, symbolically dying to self to rise as a servant of Christ in his church, few could have imagined that this humble American would one day wear the fisherman's ring. After ordination, Francis Prevost continued his studies in Rome, earning a doctorate in canon law from the prestigious Gregorian University. His dissertation on the theological foundations of church governance revealed both his brilliant analytical mind and his deep conviction that church structures must always serve the gospel, never the reverse. His professors noted his facility with languages. Spanish, Italian, and Latin flowed from him with ease, as well as his remarkable ability to identify the essential principles underlying complex canonical questions. These intellectual gifts, combined with his evident spiritual depth, marked him for leadership, though in God's providence, his path would first lead not to ecclesiastical administration, but to mission territory. The young priest's assignment to Peru in 1985 marked a pivotal turn in his life's journey. Leaving behind the familiar comforts of North America and the academic environment of Rome, Francis Prevost plunged into the vibrant yet challenging reality of Latin American Catholicism. The Peru he encountered was a land of stark contrasts. Breathtaking natural beauty alongside grinding poverty, ancient traditions coexisting with rapid social change, deep religious devotion mingled with syncretic practices. The Augustinian mission in Chulucanas, a remote region in northwestern Peru, became his new home. Here, amidst the dust and heat of rural South America, the theoretical knowledge of the canon lawyer and theologian met the practical demands of pastoral care. In villages accessible only by mule or on foot, Francis Prevost celebrated Mass, baptized children, counseled families, and trained local catechists. One colleague from this period recalled, he could discuss complex theological concepts with visiting scholars in the morning, then sit in the dirt with barefoot children in the afternoon, equally at home in both worlds. The people called him Padre Roberto, embracing him not as a foreign missionary but as their own pastor who shared their joys and sorrows. What began as a temporary assignment extended into nearly 2 decades, as Peru shaped the priest as much as he influenced the communities he served. Father Prevost's leadership qualities soon became evident within the Augustinian community. In 1991, he was elected prior provincial of the Augustinian province of Peru, responsible for guiding the order's mission and members throughout the country. His administrative style combined clear vision with collaborative implementation. He listened, before deciding, consulted widely but acted decisively. Under his leadership, vocations to the order increased, new ministries to the poor were established, and Augustinian communities renewed their commitment to both contemplation and action. His fellow friars noted his remarkable ability to balance the demands of administration with continued pastoral presence among the people. Even as provincial, he maintained regular visits to remote villages, celebrated the sacraments with the faithful, and remained accessible to both religious and laity. During Peru's tumultuous political period marked by the Shining Path insurgency and economic crises, Father Prevost provided steady leadership, emphasizing the Church's role in promoting peace, justice, and reconciliation without partisan alignment. His experience in Peru profoundly shaped his understanding of the Church's mission in the modern world, a church that must be both faithful to tradition and responsive to contemporary needs, that stands with the marginalized without abandoning doctrinal clarity. The wider Augustinian community recognized Father Prevost's exceptional leadership qualities, and in 2001, the Order's General Chapter elected him Prior General, the highest position within the Order of St. Augustine worldwide. At 46, he became one of the youngest to hold this office in recent history. Accepting this role meant leaving his beloved Peru for Rome, exchanging direct pastoral ministry for global administrative responsibility. As Prior General, he would oversee Augustinian communities across 6 continents, from ancient European priories to new foundations in Asia and Africa. His installation homily revealed his approach to this new ministry. Authority in religious life is not about power, but service, not about preserving institutions but fostering authentic discipleship. May I never forget that I am called first to be a brother among brothers, a servant following the servant Lord. This vision of humble leadership would characterize his 12 years guiding the worldwide Augustinian community, as he served 2 consecutive 6-year terms, the maximum permitted under the Order's constitutions. Father Prevost's tenure as Prior General coincided with challenging times for religious life. Globally, declining numbers in traditional strongholds, financial pressures, the clergy abuse crisis, and questions about religious identity in a secular age. Yet under his guidance, the Augustinians experienced renewal in many regions. He prioritized formation, establishing programs to ensure that new members were grounded in both Augustinian spirituality and contemporary theological understanding. He traveled extensively, visiting communities from Indonesia to Kenya, from Australia to Bolivia, listening to local concerns while reinforcing the universal bonds of the Order. His letters to the Order emphasized a return to the Augustinian essentials: community life, prayer, study, and service. In times of uncertainty, he wrote, "We must not chase novelty for its own sake, nor cling to the past out of fear. Instead, like Augustine himself, we must seek the eternal truth who is ever ancient, ever new." During this period, Father Prevost's reputation grew beyond Augustinian circles. His contributions to various Vatican dicasteries and international religious conferences demonstrated his balanced approach to ecclesial questions. When Pope Benedict XVI convened a synod on consecrated life, Father Prevost's intervention impressed many with its clarity and depth. His facility with languages allowed him to bridge diverse perspectives, while his personal holiness gave weight to his words. As his second term neared completion in 2013, many wondered what would be next for this American religious leader who had spent most of his priestly life outside his homeland. After completing his service as Prior General, many expected Father Prevost would return to academic life or perhaps assume leadership in the American province of Augustinians. Instead, in a move that surprised many but revealed his missionary heart, he requested to return to Peru, the country that had formed him as a pastor. However, divine providence had other plans. In January 2015, Pope Francis recognizing Prevost's unique combination of administrative skill, pastoral experience, and doctrinal soundness, appointed him Bishop of Chiclayo, a diocese of nearly 2 million Catholics in northern Peru. On the feast of St. Joseph, March 19, 2015, Robert Francis Prevost was consecrated a bishop in the Cathedral of Chiclayo. During the ancient ritual, as the open book of Gospels was held over his head, symbolizing the weight of the word he would now preach with authority, Bishop Prevost chose as his episcopal motto, Christus totum nobis est, Christ is everything for us, reflecting his Augustinian conviction that all ministry must be Christ-centered and Christ-directed. Bishop Prevost approached his new role with characteristic humility and energy. His first pastoral letter to the diocese emphasized a return to essentials. Our strength lies not in programs or structures, but in genuine encounter with the living Christ in word, sacrament, and service to one another. He established a diocesan, pastoral plan focused on family ministry, youth formation, care for the poor, and ongoing formation for clergy and laity alike. Despite the administrative demands of leading a large diocese, Bishop Prevost maintained his commitment to being among the people. He established a practice of visiting every parish at least once a year, often staying overnight in remote communities, sharing meals with families, and listening to local concerns. During natural disasters that periodically struck the region, he was often seen helping with relief efforts, not merely administering them from a distance. His straightforward preaching style, which combined doctrinal clarity with practical application, resonated with the faithful. Bishop Prevost does not speak in abstractions, one parishioner noted. When he preaches about mercy or justice or family life, you understand exactly what he means for your daily life. While firm in upholding church teaching, especially regarding the sanctity of life and marriage, he approached controversial issues with pastoral sensitivity, seeking to accompany people in difficult situations without compromising truth. Bishop Prevost's balanced leadership and pastoral wisdom did not go unnoticed in Rome. In 2020, while continuing to lead the Diocese of Chiclayo, he was appointed a member of the Congregation for Bishops, the Vatican dicastery responsible for evaluating candidates for the episcopacy worldwide. This role required regular travel to Rome for meetings, giving him increased visibility within Vatican circles. Pope Francis, who had come to value Prevost's judgment and pastoral approach, appointed him prefect of the Congregation for Bishops in January 2023, elevating him to the rank of archbishop. This appointment placed him in one of the most influential positions in the Roman Curia, directly shaping the future leadership of the Church through his role in selecting bishops. Moving to Rome, Archbishop Prevost brought his characteristic work ethic and prayerful discernment to this critical ministry. Colleagues in the Curia noted his meticulous attention to the qualifications of episcopal candidates, prioritizing pastoral experience and spiritual depth over academic credentials or administrative skills alone. The Church needs shepherds, not mere managers, he often remarked in private conversations. Men who smell like their sheep, who know doctrine not as an abstract system, but as the living truth of Christ. His approach to episcopal appointments reflected his conviction that the renewal of the Church depended primarily on holy and courageous bishops who could both safeguard the deposit of faith and communicate it effectively to contemporary society. During his tenure as prefect, a subtle but significant shift occurred in the profile of bishops being appointed. Men known for both doctrinal fidelity and pastoral creativity, capable of articulating timeless truths in ways accessible to modern audiences. Archbishop Prevost maintained a low public profile during this period, avoiding interviews and declining invitations to comment on controversial issues. His focus remained on the work entrusted to him, carried out with diligence and discretion. Yet within Vatican circles his influence grew steadily, as his judgment proved sound and his commitment to the Church's mission unwavering. When Pope Francis's health began to decline more rapidly in late 2024, few outside the College of Cardinals considered Archbishop Prevost among the likely papal candidates. He was neither a cardinal nor widely known to the public. However, those who worked closely with him recognized qualities that the Church would need in its next leader: deep spirituality, intellectual clarity, administrative competence, and a global perspective shaped by both American and Latin American experiences. The conclave of 2025 began amid swirling speculation and prayer. Pope Francis's death had concluded a significant era in the Church's life, leaving questions about the direction the next pontificate would take. Would the cardinals choose continuity or correction? A European traditionalist or a progressive from the global south? As the 124 cardinal electors entered the Sistine Chapel on a crisp February morning, Bishop Prevost was not among them, having not yet been elevated to the College of Cardinals. Yet in God's mysterious providence, his name emerged during the early deliberations. Cardinal electors seeking a candidate who could bridge different factions within the Church suggested considering the American Archbishop who had impressed many with his balanced approach as prefect of the Congregation for Bishops. According to later accounts from participants, the turning point came during the fourth ballot, when a senior European cardinal spoke passionately about the need for a pope who combined doctrinal clarity with pastoral sensitivity, administrative experience with missionary zeal, precisely the qualities Prevost embodied. The discussions intensified, with supporters emphasizing Prevost's unique combination of experiences: formation in the intellectual tradition of St. Augustine, 2 decades of hands-on ministry in Peru, leadership of a global religious order, and executive experience in the Roman Curia. Some raised concerns about his American nationality. Would a U.S. Pope be seen as too closely aligned with Western political interests? Others noted his long missionary service and the fact that he spoke Spanish as fluently as English. What began as a suggestion quickly gained momentum as cardinal after cardinal, from different regions and theological perspectives, expressed support. By the 7th ballot, a clear trend was emerging. By the 9th, Archbishop Robert Francis Prevost had received the required 2/3 majority. When asked by the Cardinal Dean whether he accepted his election as Supreme Pontiff, Archbishop Prevost reportedly paused in silent prayer before responding with Augustine's words, "Pondus meum amor meus." "My love is my weight," signifying that love for Christ and his Church drew him to accept this overwhelming responsibility. When asked what name he would take, he chose Leo, honoring Leo X, whose social teaching had deeply influenced him, and Leo the Great, who had guided the Church through tumultuous times with doctrinal clarity. The number 14th connected him to this lineage while signifying a new chapter in the Church's life. When Pope Leo XIII stepped onto the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica for the first time, the massive crowd fell silent, straining to catch the first words of this unexpected pontiff. His slight frame, silver-rimmed glasses, and gentle demeanor gave him an almost professorial appearance. Yet there was unmistakable strength in his posture and clarity in his gaze. "Dear brothers and sisters," he began, speaking first in Italian, and then repeating his message in Spanish, English, and Latin. "Before all else, I ask you to pray for me, that I may be a faithful servant of Christ and his Church." Then, departing from recent custom, he knelt before the people, bowing his head in silent prayer for several moments. This gesture, the new pope kneeling before offering his first blessing, became instantly symbolic of his understanding of the papacy: authority exercised in humble service, leadership through self-giving love. Rising, Pope Leo continued, "In a world fragmented by division and clouded by confusion, Christ remains the steady light that illuminates our path. Not my voice, but his must be heard. Not my wisdom, but the wisdom of the cross must guide us. Christ must be all in all." The theological depth and spiritual focus of this initial address signaled the priorities of the new pontificate. There was no political commentary, no reference to contemporary controversies, only the essentials of the faith presented with clarity and conviction. The Church exists for one purpose alone: to bring souls to Christ and Christ to souls. When we lose sight of this mission, we lose our way. When we embrace it fully, even the gates of hell cannot prevail against us. These words resonated across St. Peter's Square and through global media around the world. Catholic commentators noted the distinctly Augustinian spirituality evident in the new pope's words: the centrality of Christ, the primacy of grace, The Church is a communion of love journeying toward the heavenly city. Before concluding, Pope Leo XIV spoke directly to the youth. To the young people of our world I say, do not be afraid to swim against the current. The deepest joy is found not in following the shifting fashions of the moment, but in the radical adventure of following Christ. He calls you not to mediocrity but to greatness, the greatness of holiness. With these words and the Urbi et Orbi blessing, the new pontificate officially began, launching what many would later describe as an era of clarifying mercy, a time when the Church's ancient truths would be proclaimed with renewed vigor and compassionate application. In the early months of his pontificate, Pope Leo XIV established a pattern of leadership focused primarily on spiritual renewal rather than structural reform. His first encyclical, Cor Inquietum, Restless Heart, released just 3 months after his election, set the theological foundation for his papacy. Drawing deeply from Augustinian spirituality, the document addressed the modern search for meaning amid consumerism, technological distraction, and moral relativism. The human heart remains restless until it rests in God, he wrote, echoing Augustine's famous words. As Pope Leo XIV's pontificate continues to unfold, observers across the ecclesial and political spectrum have noted his unique contribution to the Church and world. Neither easily categorized as conservative nor progressive, he has consistently emphasized the perennial truths of the faith while seeking creative ways to communicate them in contemporary language and contexts. His leadership style combines clear direction with collegial consultation, firm principles with merciful application, and intellectual depth with simple expression. Vatican analyst John Allen described him as a pope who thinks like Augustine, governs like Benedict, and communicates like Francis, a rare combination of gifts precisely suited to our confusing times. What many find most distinctive about Leo XIV is his emphasis on the interior life as the foundation for exterior ministry. In a culture obsessed with metrics, programs, and visible outcomes, he continually points to prayer, sacraments, and personal holiness as the essential sources of authentic renewal. The Church does not need more managers but more mystics, he told a gathering of bishops. Not more committees but more contemplatives, not more strategists but more saints. This focus on spiritual essentials has resonated with many Catholics, tired of ecclesiastical politics and yearning for authentic faith. Vocations to the priesthood and religious life have shown marked increases in regions where his vision has been embraced, particularly among young people attracted to his combination of doctrinal clarity and spiritual depth. At the same time, his pontificate has not been without critics. Some traditionalists find his openness to pastoral adaptation concerning, while progressives consider his doctrinal positions too rigid. Yet even critics acknowledge his consistent focus on Christ-centered renewal rather than self-referential reform. As the Church faces unprecedented challenges in the modern world, secularization, religious indifference, ethical confusion, and internal divisions, Pope Leo XIV continues to offer a steady hand at the wheel of Peter's barque. His repeated refrain, "Christ must be all in all," serves as both compass and anchor for a church navigating stormy waters. Through his words and witness, Pope Leo reminds the faithful that the Church's ultimate strength lies not in political influence, cultural relevance, or institutional structures, but in faithful adherence to her Lord and his teaching. In a world of shifting sands, he points consistently to the rock of Christ as the only secure foundation. And so the journey continues, guided by this unexpected American pontiff whose life journey from Chicago to Peru to Rome now shapes the universal church, a living testament that God often works through unlikely instruments to accomplish his eternal purposes. No advancement in technology, no accumulation of wealth, no expansion of personal autonomy can satisfy the soul's deepest longing for transcendent truth and love. Rather than condemning contemporary culture outright, the encyclical offered a compassionate diagnosis of modern spiritual ailments and proposed the perennial remedy of encounter with Christ through Scripture, sacraments, prayer, and service to others. The document's final section presented a vision of the Church as a field hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints, while insisting that true healing required both divine mercy and moral transformation. Pope Leo's leadership style quickly became evident in his appointments and priorities. He selected close advisors known for both doctrinal soundness and pastoral creativity, avoiding ideologues of either progressive or traditionalist extremes. His Wednesday general audiences became catechetical opportunities, as he systematically explored the Creed, the sacraments, the Ten Commandments, and the Lord's Prayer in accessible yet profound reflections. Unlike some of his predecessors who traveled extensively, Pope Leo limited his international journeys to focus on the daily governance of the Church and regular pastoral presence in the Diocese of Rome. "The Pope is first the Bishop of Rome," he explained. "I must know my local flock before I can effectively shepherd the universal Church." His visits to Roman parishes, hospitals, prisons, and schools revealed his priority for direct pastoral engagement. In curial reform, he emphasized simplification and spiritual renewal rather than mere structural reorganization. "No organizational chart can substitute for personal holiness," he told curial officials during a retreat. "We need not merely more efficient structures but more faithful servants." He required all Vatican officials to commit to regular prayer, spiritual direction, and annual retreats, stating plainly, "If we do not pray, we have nothing to offer the Church but our own limited wisdom." As his pontificate progressed, Pope Leo XIV addressed the Church's most pressing challenges with a combination of doctrinal clarity and pastoral sensitivity that became his hallmark. On the clergy abuse scandal that had damaged the Church's credibility, he pursued a policy of zero tolerance with enhanced accountability measures, while also calling for spiritual purification and renewed commitment to priestly holiness. This crisis arose not from too much fidelity to Christ but from too little, he stated. "The solution lies not in abandoning or weakening our commitments, but in living them more authentically." His apostolic exhortation on priestly formation, Alter Christus, emphasized both rigorous screening of candidates and comprehensive formation, integrating human, spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral dimensions. On divisions within the Church, between traditionalist and progressive factions, Pope Leo took a balanced approach, affirming that the Church breathes with two lungs, continuity and development, both guided by the same Spirit. He expanded permissions for the traditional Latin Mass while insisting that liturgical preferences must never become sources of division or self-righteousness. At the same time, he clarified doctrinal boundaries on controversial moral issues, reaffirming the Church's teaching on the sanctity of life, marriage, and sexual ethics, while encouraging more effective pastoral accompaniment of those in irregular situations. Pope Leo's approach to the Church's social mission reflected his integration of doctrinal principles with practical application. Building on Catholic social teaching from Leo XIII through Francis, he emphasized both personal charity and structural justice as essential expressions of Christian love. His encyclical Dignitas Personae provided a comprehensive framework for addressing contemporary ethical issues in biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and digital communication, always centering on the inherent dignity of the human person from conception to natural death. On environmental concerns, he advanced an integral ecology that connected care for creation with respect for the Creator and his moral law. Perhaps most notably, Pope Leo XIV sought to revitalize the Church's evangelizing mission in an increasingly secular world. His apostolic constitution, Lumen Gentium Christi, called for a renewal of catechesis, apologetics, and cultural engagement, emphasizing that the Church exists to evangelize, and each baptized person is a missionary disciple. He established a new dicastery for new evangelization, tasked with developing strategies to reach the unchurched, the de-churched, and nominal Catholics. "We cannot be content with maintaining existing structures while souls drift away from Christ," he stated. "The Church must recover her apostolic zeal and missionary creativity."